Welcome everybody, my name is Michael DeSchalit, and my partner here today is Jason Linett. That's all we got so far.
We're sending out the surveys.
Yeah, and we're striving for straight 10s on the survey, even though it only goes to 5. So no, we're here to talk about the Theatrical Connection. We're not Scott McFall. Scott had a travel delay, and so we're filling in for him, so we really have no idea. But we are going to make it as entertaining and informative as possible for you, and we'll maybe have some time at the end for questions, and would love to hear what your expectations were being here in this class, titled what it was, and with the speaker that it was supposed to be. And we'll see what we can do to fill that in for you.
Which is a bit of an introduction into this. I know you have a background in theatrics as well, coming from the background, correct me here, of being a magician, getting into stage hypnosis, that leading into then hypnotherapy. My backstory was that I actually began my career not as a hypnotist. Hypnosis was this hobby off to the side, and I was working in professional theater. I wasn't an actor, I wasn't a director, I wasn't a designer, I was the stage manager behind the table, organizing all these extremely creative people, which if that's not psychological training, I don't know what is. And you learn a lot about the theatrics of the process by, let's phrase it positively, watching it done sometimes extremely well, but you'd often learn even more about the direction and the timing of things by watching it being done horribly. So some of the themes that I've kind of jotted some notes down on, it brings to mind the story. There's this amazing musical, I think it's back on Broadway again, called Once on This Island. And it's a calypso retelling of The Little Mermaid. And it's this beautiful, funny, high-energy musical, and this is the quick story of the time that they fired the lighting designer in a matter of 2 weeks, because he's lighting this funny, bright, jolly musical with very dark, sort of looming tones. And just, there was this clash, the things did not match up. So there's some themes of tone, some themes of building expectation, of you have to match the style of it. There's videos that are circling around the internet these days of someone did an edit of Mary Poppins with like horror movie music underneath it. And it's the creepiest damn thing, and it will ruin your childhood. So to look at, again, what's the tone, what's the expectation we're bringing into our work, and how do we harness that expectation of the client and really put that to use as well.
And Jason, you have a background too. I think you did stage management, correct?
Yes.
And so stage managers, if you don't know, if you've never been backstage in a theater, stage managers are really the air traffic controllers of everything. They manage what goes on backstage, or their communication with the light and sound booth up front, and they've got a lot to manage, and really it very directly correlates with managing clients. We have clients that come in all the time with various reasons, various causes, various problems that they expect us to help them solve. And so it's a lot of management, and you do have to think on your feet an awful lot. And stage management is just that, it's live theater. You can't say, whoa, time out a second, let's regroup here. Yeah, it just doesn't work. And it's crisis management all the time. I remember I was backstage in a theater, I was doing a show there, and there was a website written above the stage manager's podium, and it said remain.com. Play of words, right? Remain.com. If you say it fast, it sounds like remain calm, right? Remain.com, but it's remain.com. And that's really what it's all about, is how do you remain calm? How do you tie in all the knowledge that you have in an instant when a client suddenly takes a left-hand turn with you and says, oh, and by the way, I don't like kittens. And you're like, oh, well, okay, and you came in here for Stop Smoking. Fabulous. Okay, where do we go? And you're all of a sudden, you're turning the car. And so you have to somehow get that back into scope and into perspective and into a reasonable expectation. And a lot of times we use our theatrical experience to create that expectation for the clients. And so that's really kind of, I think, what we're going to talk about. You had some notes, I did not.
Yeah, some notes that there's a French magician by the name of Jean-Eugène Robert-Houdin, because of course there was, who his legacy was that he was one of the first magicians to step on stage wearing a tuxedo with the tails and the top hat and the cane. Our stereotypical classic image of the magician goes back to Jean-Eugène Robert-Houdin, which part of Houdin's legacy was that a young Jewish boy by the name of Eric Weiss was really emulating what Houdin was doing, and Eric Weiss changed his name to Harry Houdini. So, useless trivia, there'll be a quiz later on this evening. So I bring this up because one of the most classic quotes of Houdin's was that a magician is an actor playing the role of a magician. So think about, here's the magician on stage, And for him to be in that moment, looking up in the air and noticing a little pocket where perhaps a coin is there in this little invisible pocket in the air. And he's reaching up and grabbing a hold of it and plucking it out, and suddenly to the audience, the coin appears. If this is the inner dialogue of the magician, the audience is going to believe that moment to be more as magic. Meanwhile, and not to get full esoteric and metaphysical on this, if the magician's up there thinking, okay, sorry, the coin is hidden in this part of my thumb, and I'm holding it at an angle that the audience cannot see it, and I have to reach back with my 2 fingers and bring it out at such a time and flip it into a horizontal position, so suddenly it appears as if it plucks out of the air, but at the same time pull in this gesture, that's going to make the trick work. If he's thinking in that respect, he's going to be projecting to the audience that this is just a technical stunt. And the audience is going to start to perceive that more of the, wow, he's really good at that, as opposed to that's really being magic. This is not a magic convention, though, so why do I bring this up? It's where you as the hypnotist recognize the client is calling you because of a specific reason. This is where there's some opinions that I've got that may go a little against what some people often say in hypnosis. The perspective that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. I would add an extra word to the end of that. All hypnosis is self-hypnosis eventually. That we very much begin with a practitioner driving the process at the origin of the process. And it's not that I would ever look at a client and say, I can make you do things you would normally not do. It's not that I would ever say that. I don't. Yet realize there's a reason that person is calling you. There is a perception that they have in their mind as to who you are and what you may be as the hypnotist. And we have some responsibility, in my opinion, to deliver that in a very respectful way. And this exact title of the Theatrical Connection, it's where using this opportunity to build that environment, that this is the place where the change happens. That there's this quick story of this little girl who the mother called me up, and the mother described it. She goes, my daughter at 10 years old has a problem that every parent wishes their 10-year-old kid had. She's afraid of watching television. She saw something happen. It was some grotesque magic show. Kevin Smith.
Kevin James.
Kevin James, yeah.
James.
Kevin James is a magician who does the classic sawed-in-half illusion. But there's no box and there's a chainsaw. And the top half of the body is now running around the stage on its hands. It's amazing. Look it up on YouTube. Little girl sees this on television, to use the medical term, freaks the hell out, and is refusing to go near the television. Now, this is not a negative commentary on other professions, yet she had gone through therapists working with systematic desensitization. Let's just watch video clips of magic shows over and over to resolve this issue. So thinking about the theatrical environment, what is her expectation? This guy who's about to help her out, hopefully in terms of getting rid of this fear, he's probably going to do the same thing that the other guy did. So it's where, from my hypnotic perspective, we've got to break that state. We've got to change that dynamic. So as soon as she's in the room with me, hey, little 12-year-old, we'll call her Michaela, little 12-year-old, 10-year-old Michaela.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, I know.
I see what you did there.
Before we get started, let me do one thing. I got on my hands and knees. I crawled under my desk. I've got way too much tech in my office. I've got the dual monitor desktop computer. I crawled underneath my desk, and I didn't just shut down my computer. I yanked the cable out from the wall. I'm paperless in my office, and I'm taking notes typically on an iPad just with my finger and a note-taking app. And I took this, it was an older version, and I planned this ahead of time. I used to have a case that you could throw the iPad at the wall, and it'd be fine. And I took this and just went out the hallway. Hey, what's it going to be like when this is no longer a problem? Yeah, we do things differently here. That process would not have started unless we very much broke the state of what was there before. There was an expectation she was bringing in. So the real meaning behind these stories is to think about, what is the expectation of the client, both positive and negative? And how do we harness those? How do we utilize those? How do we put that into use in such a way to begin to navigate towards that change? Which is all very theatrical in its nature, to look at what is the scene shift? What is that lighting tone that has to happen? What is that moment where we just saw the movie First Man, which is the telling of Neil Armstrong's first step on the moon. And the most magical moment of the movie is suddenly here's the shot walking out of the spaceship, and it's absolute silent. There's been music, there's been a tone that's been set, but then suddenly here's the drop of energy, and just there it is. So to look at, again, what's the theatrical tone of what's going on, how do we harness it, how do we utilize it, and how do we use that to the leverage to actually create the change?
And even stepping back a step further, clients call you. They have an expectation of what a hypnotist is going to do, what it's going to be like, because they've seen something that has unfortunately portrayed us in a different way. Hollywood portrays hypnosis in an entirely different light than what it really is. So they come with these preconceived notions. They come with these expectations, and so we have to reset that stage. In theater, it's called, striking a stage. We'll strike the stage. We'll come in, rebuild the set. We will we'll put spike marks down, so the little pieces of tape on the stage, so we know everybody knows where to stand. We'll start loading in the props. We'll build the scenery. We'll bring in the soft goods, the curtains. We'll bring in the lights. We'll hang all the electric, and then we'll start programming the light board. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in a theatrical production. And then, of course, the audio cues, and everybody gets mic'd up. Then the day of the performance or before, you've got to do a mic check, and then you deliver it. Now, an interesting thing happened. I went to see about 6, 8 months ago the Book of Mormon, the musical, the Book of Mormon. And has anybody ever seen it? Okay. If you have not seen it, it's not what you think. Very, very wrong on a lot of different levels. So it's created by the same people that created South Park. Okay, so if you have ever watched that, and now throw the Book of Mormon in on top of that, and it's going to go horribly wrong, okay?
Or horribly right.
Or horribly right. It's my favorite musical now of all time. But I watched the audience coming in, and everybody had an expectation, except for this one elderly couple. They were somehow misled. They knew that it was going to be about the Book of Mormon. Oh, they were kind of partially right, I guess, But and it was interesting too, because Mormon missionaries were out in the front of the theater, soliciting and talking to people about the Book of Mormon. So, and I'm thinking they capitalized on a great opportunity, didn't they?
Yeah.
So they were trying to set people on the right path, and we were all going down the dark side, and real quick on a fast-moving bus. And one of the songs in there gratuitously uses the F word about 700 times, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a friend who swears a lot, and I do too sometimes, and I can't even use it that much. I mean, they were stringing it in sentences. It was good. And so at that point, this couple walked out.
Yeah.
Okay? So we have to be careful that we, and coming from an entertainment background, I started off as a stage hypnotist before I became a clinical hypnotist. Before that was a magician. And so I kind of understand what everything to me is a theatrical production. Life is a theatrical production. So much so that when my oldest daughter got married in March, she said, I'm going to plan my own wedding. I'm going to have a day of coordinator. And I'm going to plan my own wedding, though. I'm going to make sure this thing runs. And I said, it's going to be easy, honey. And she goes, yeah, it's just like doing a show, isn't it? And she grew up backstage. She grew up in green rooms and backstage. Every show she's ever seen has been from the side wings. So, and unfortunately, as performers, we see most shows not as you're looking. We see them like this. We're in the side of the stage looking in. So I just realized I went off camera when I did that. That was cool. Yeah, little screen right there. That was very serious. Notice the entrance. So how do we set the stage for our clients? How do we get them to a level of expectation that is not only good for them but correct? Okay, so a lot of times they'll come in and go, my husband said, don't make me cluck like a chicken. That's what we do. That's just what I do in my office. I make you cluck like a chicken. That's not what we do. So we have to educate. We have to straighten them out a little bit, don't we? But we also then have to continue on. If they have an expectation for, say, stop smoking or weight management or stress control or whatever they're coming in for, we have to make sure that we take their expectation, remold it. Now, I had an idea of the Book of Mormon, what it was going to be about. I mean, I knew. But I didn't know the whole story, and so I was totally ignorant of that. And when I got the playbill, I looked at it, and I realized half the cast were African American, and the other half were young white guys. I'm like, who wrote this? And what kind? I mean, there's like three girls in the whole thing. So I mean, what happened here? And I'm like, wow, this is an unusual cast. And then when it all unfolded, it's like, okay, good. So my expectations were open for opinion. They're open for that input. So we have to, again, if you program a theatrical production correctly, people will have an expectation, and then there might be that twist in the plot. And then they change their expectation, and it is congruent with what the theatrical production, the end result is going to be, the last bow, the last applause. So how do we do that? How do we use our theatrical approach our theatrical background. How can you use a theatrical approach to making your clients not only come in with an expectation, allowing that expectation to be flexible and change, and to be congruent at all times with their goals of the outcome they want to achieve. So, and should we drift into through hypnotic phenomenon now, or is that?
Let's go there in a second, because
okay.
there's one shift that I made in working with my clients about 6 years ago that literally overnight made me so much more effective with my clients. One shift that I applied to the entire process that immediately got a massive result, which is that I shifted all of my language to be all about the outcome. The whole intake process is, what's that going to give you? What's that going to be like? And really more so, again, back to the magician is the actor playing the role of the magician, or let's model that for ourselves. The hypnotist is that performer stepping into that role as the hypnotist. So it's where I'm immediately associating with the person as soon as they call me. You've got this. This is going to be easy. This is going to be fun. What's it going to be like when this is no longer an issue? It's where I'm not allowing any bit of my language, I'm not allowing any bit of the way that I communicate with the client to ever project if, maybe, hopefully. I keep referring these days to fingers crossed hypnosis. And even so, I've now used that language in the process to go, as we're working together, there's going to be several points in this process where I'm checking in with you, where you're going to be giving me feedback along the way, consciously and unconsciously, as to what's working best. That way we both know by the time you leave today, this is done, this is taken care of. I don't believe in the model of what we call fingers crossed hypnosis. Hope it works, let me know next week if it's stuck. No, we're going to be getting specific feedback the entire way through that we've got this. Sound good? It was just this massive pattern interrupt of whatever they've been at before. There's some people who would ask the question to the person, scale of 1 to 10, what's the motivation, let's say, to stop smoking? And I've classically found if you ask that and they say 8 or a 9, I'll follow up with, why not a 10? And it's never the dialogue of, well, I don't know if I want to, or I'm not sure if I'm ready. I get the feedback of, well, I've just failed so many times. And imagine now, here you are, you're that client, and you're now in a space where just my subtext is very theatrically minded. The subtext here is, that's not even an option. This is where we're both going today. There's something that I modeled from Ken Guzzo, who's out of Sacramento. This is not exactly his way of doing it, but with credit to him, it was an inspiration of something of his. There's a way that I learned from him, a greeting in the office, that rather than they come in and, how was traffic? Were you able to park all right? Yeah. Do you need a bathroom before we get started? That is an important question. But rather than the standard stuff that they expect, let me, the moment you walk in the door, build the expectation. Things are going to be different here. And it's where fold in at this point, break the pattern of what we've been taught. We learn the rules of the process. We learn a system of hypnosis. They come in, intake interview, pre-talk, induction, deepeners. Here's your suggestions. Here's your emergence. We learn this classic pattern. But the more refined you get at this, the more important it is to break that pattern with intention. So they walk in the door. So good to see you today. Ready to get rid of that fear once and for all? Awesome. Before we get started, hold your hands up. This is kind of fun. Squeeze those hands down. Just follow along with me. Bring these fingers up and just look at the moment. At the moment, I'm going to count from 1 to 3. At the count of 3, you'll extend those fingers. Imagine there's magnets. Watch what happens. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Extend those fingers. Look at that space between. Feel those magnets, feeling those fingers drawing closer and closer together. When they touch, let them drop down. Cool. Yeah. Why did I do that? Well, that's what we call a moment of hypnotic phenomenon. I know how to put the right words in the right order to create that response. And can I let you in on a secret? If you ask somebody to perform that series of actions, that's something that happens on its own. Try it for someone later today. If you ask them to perform that series, I debunk it. Ask them to perform that series of actions, their fingers naturally want to draw together. It's the muscles, it's the tendons within your hands. Now that's not necessarily hypnosis, but that's exactly like what's about to happen in a couple of moments. I know how to put the right words in the right order, and it's your body that already knows how to create this change. Ready to do this? Yeah, good, come on back. So imagine now starting your session. When I teach business, when I teach marketing, I'm doing a 1 o'clock today on websites, the mindset of going after a small win. It's all, I've been crediting an amazing physician in my presentations in recent years. Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Leo Marvin? Have you seen What About Bob?
Oh, yeah.
Baby steps. It's about getting that little bit of a foot in the door, that little bit of a small win. And here's the moment where rather than let me very unfairly characterize a lot of the hypnosis work that's out there. Let's sit together in this room and talk about the problem for a half an hour, and what's the subtext of that? Let's convince each other this is impossible to resolve. Let's talk about stage hypnosis. You get them excited in the audience. You bring them up on stage, bore the hell out of them for 25 minutes of a long, slow, drawn-out induction. Then from there, it's an uphill battle to try to get them animated again. What is the tone that I want to create, and what is something that I can do to create that tone? So it's very, almost like a magician, misdirective in nature. How can I use this process to set the tone for the next step? So what happened in that greeting? I immediately had compliance without having to fight for it. There's an amazing framework of just before we get started, which we know as hypnotists, the entire process is hypnotic suggestion. So to make that greeting in such a way that interrupts whatever patterns, whatever concerns, whatever, it's where if we're looking in this model, the pre-talk almost becomes courtesy. And we now get to use the pre-talk to set the mindset for a successful experience, rather than using the pre-talk of, in the words of Sean Michael Andrews, to look at a client and say, I'm not going to make you tell secrets. That wasn't their fear, now it is. But to use the pre-talk to set the stage for a successful experience. The way that a play very often has to have that moment of exposition, where the characters have to find a way to give you the backstory without someone having to come out. This is where I did not get along with people in the theater career. The director who goes, well, I need to have liner notes in the playbill so people know what the play's about. To which I'd be, I worked a lot with premieres when I was in theater. And the line of, well, you have 2.5 hours of the actors on stage, can't you tell the story then? I have to do a curtain speech so they understand the play. You can't pull that off in 3 hours on stage. Using the experience itself to stand on its own. So again, how do we set that experience from the moment they walk in the door? I've now got a person who is excited for the change, compliant with my instructions, and my mindset is, you're not allowed in that room back there until we do this, until we have this process in motion.
When a smoker walks into my office, actually when they used to walk into my office, I no longer have a physical brick and mortar office. I work with clients online. I do everything virtually now. And even when I first see them on camera for smoking cessation, the first thing out of my mouth is not, how was your day, what's going on, any of the small talk like you referenced also. I just say, how's life now as a non-smoker? And when they used to walk in my office, that was how I greeted them. I said, hey, you're John. Thanks for being here, John. How's life as a non-smoker? And they would be like, what happened already? Holy smokes. They thought I was better than I really was. They said, wow, when did you do that? And it actually even traces back before building the expectation of the phone call. They'll call you, they'll talk to you for a little bit, they schedule the consultation, they come in for that. And starting then, that's when the process starts, is the consultation. Whether they work with me or not, I'm going to plant that seed for them. That is the notes in the playbill, if you will, the unwritten notes in the playbill. I'm going to set that stage for them right then and there, that is going to be the end result. If you create the expectation, that's what they want anyways. The key word being want. That's what they want. And a lot of times people don't really even know what they want. So you have to give them that too. You have to help them with that process too. But if they do know what they want, they don't really know how to get it. And they don't know how it's going to happen, because a lot of people have never been to a hypnotist before. So I create that expectation from the second the phone rings, as soon as I find out what they're wanting to use hypnosis to change their life for. Start then, why wait? The pre-talk actually for me is kind of part of the induction. When does the induction start? The second the phone rings. And I will trace that through, and I will do in comedy it's called a callback, where you'll refer back to something earlier in your routine that's funny, and you'll say the phrase or the callback, and then people will laugh and go, oh yeah, that's what it is. And so I'll ask them, what's it like to be a non-smoker? How's life as a non-smoker? I didn't know it started yet. Oh, okay, well, come on in and have a seat, let's talk. And they'll do all the stuff that we need to do, the intake forms and everything like that. Now it's all done online for me, so I don't even have to deal with that part. So I can get right into the production. I can get right into the theatrics. I can go right into some hypnotic phenomenon and get them framed and mentally framed to experience success before they're really even experiencing success. That's really critical, I think, because a lot of times we get caught up in the process. Well, I have to do a pre-talk, I have to do hypnotic testing, I have to somehow prove to you that you were in hypnosis with hypnotic phenomena. Oh, I think that's kind of old school now. I mean, now it's like I want them to have that expectation. I want to be able to create that scenery for them so that I don't really have to work as hard, and they will prove it. So later on in the process, I have a protocol that I use. It's called the Genie Protocol. I think I spoke about it here last year. And where I get them to heighten their expectations to create an even higher level of what they thought they wanted. Now they're willing to fight me for it, and then I become the genie that they rub the lamp, and here I am. They get 3 wishes, or 4 or 5. I have some latitude with that. I'm a pretty flexible genie and a pretty liberal one, and I'm willing to give them some more. But I want to know what those wishes are, and then I want them to fight me for them. Because if I'm the genie that's going to grant them those wishes, now I did turn it around though, didn't I? There. I said a different, I did a pattern interrupt from creating expectations to almost taking them away, that forbidden fruit. And then, so if I'm the genie that's going to grant you those wishes, you know, how bad do you want them? And I get them to finally get to the point where they say, dang it, I want it. That's why I'm here. I want it. And then they realize at that instant, that's the pivotal moment for most of my clients. And we haven't done any hypnosis yet. We haven't done the induction, we haven't done any deepeners, we haven't done really any hypnotic depth testing at that point because they're not in traditional hypnosis yet. And so at that point, when they finally say, you know, they usually say, they don't say dang it, they say, damn it, I want it, damn it, I want it. And they get angry, they get upset, they fight, sometimes they cry. And I say, great. So I have a question for you. When do you think that hypnosis started? And that just, you know, I don't know. Like when I walked in the door, or maybe when we talked on the phone. I don't know. When did it start for you? When did you become a non-smoker? And again, you have to listen to the responses very carefully. So, well, I'm not sure I am yet. Ooh, okay, we've got some work to do then, don't we? I go, well, I'm guessing I did the second I called you because I knew I was going to quit then. That's what I'm talking about. That's hypnotic phenomenon, isn't it? We've already caused them to change the way they think. If you change the way you think, you change all the stuff that goes on in the brain. And then if you change the stuff that goes on in the brain, then you change the outcome, don't you? Setting the stage, setting the playbill, laying it all out. They know. I know when I go see a Broadway production, I know what the story is. I know what I'm going to see, except for the last one, the Book of Mormon. But what was I surprised? but the expectation was very clear, though. The outcome was very clear, and by the end, I didn't need the story written out for me in the playbill. They laid it all out for me in true living color, and it was fabulous. And by the end, it was a remarkable story. I got it. There was nobody walked out of there going, what just happened? Well, actually, everybody walked out of there, what just happened? And then they bought the T-shirts, the lobby sales product, which they had were T-shirts, like every production sells T-shirts, like Lion Gang, you know, all that stuff. And theirs were cool because it looked like you were wearing a shirt, a white shirt with a black tie, and it had a name badge that said Elder on it. There was no questioning on what just happened. Everybody knew. The phenomenon happened the second you walked in the theater.
So a couple of thoughts. I see a few people furiously taking notes. We believe in making learning a whole lot easier. So we've got a camera running. If you want to get a copy of this to be able to refer to and grab some resources from, I'm just going to I've got a tail, so I'm going to be careful. Yeah. If you plug in your email address, it'll send you a presentation of mine about packing your office with paid clients. That'll go to you right away. Give us like 2 or 3 weeks, and that's when we'll make this video available to you, just as a thank you for coming, to make it easier to go back and refer to things. I'd refer to that moment of, again, creating that shift. So here's the moment where I mentioned the movie First Man, where suddenly the scene just goes completely silent. So to look at your entire environment the way that a designer would look at a space, which is a quick anecdote, my life as a stage manager was based on, here was a chair on a set, and one day it would be like this, and it's supposed to be like that, and that would be an hour of my day. Just because everything had to be precise, because there's this lighting instrument focused on that spot. Here's the cup on the table that no one ever picked up, no one ever drank from, and the damn cup kept falling over. And I'm there with the designer going, so no one ever picks it up? Can we just glue the damn thing down and just prevent this problem from happening again? No, it would not be glued down in their home. Therefore, it'd be inappropriate to glue it down on my set. And you have to smile and nod because the man has 5 Tony Awards. But thanks to the union, as soon as the production opened, it was my set, not his, and I epoxied the damn thing down. So
he goes to pick it up.
I pick it up now. The whole table goes with you. So it's where to look at every step, and he had a very precise reason as to why that cup was there. He had a slightly insane reason as to why it could not be glued down, but I got to pull the safety card and eventually fix the issue. The chair was on those specific marks because otherwise the lighting instrument wasn't there. The number of times, thank you, the number of times where the actor, the game of find your mark. Here's the moment where the actor is about to deliver the most important line, but if he's not standing with his right toe on that little black mark, the light's over here. And moments of just having to find the respectful way to say, look, John, if you're not there in that spot, you're going to look stupid. He goes, oh, I get it now. Finding the place to use the right terminology. So I bring that up because look at your space. Look at the environment. Look at the set that you're seeing your clients in. So when you walk into my space, it's designed in such a way that does not limit anybody. There are not any specific images that would scare somebody away. The person who is full out metaphysical and everything else, the person who is, let's say, corporate minded and believes in nothing, they're going to feel comfortable in both spots. To be in my office, if you've been to my Virginia Hypnosis website, I don't directly have a tour of my office on my website, yet many of my videos are shot around my office to indirectly show you this is a full-out hypnosis center where people come and they create change.
You just changed. I got to interrupt for a second because you just changed where you shot a video. The last video you just shot was looking down the hallway.
Which that was intentional because it was talking about, the subtext of that video was, here's the background and here's why I'm making the statement now.
And the prior videos, it's really cool, and I totally get this, and I'll share how my office was set up in a moment, but their prior videos, you had this certain picture behind you, there was a certain scene, you were in the looked like the classroom, I guess.
Right, yeah.
And so now I see this, and I look at this, and I go, wow, this office is much bigger than what I thought it was. It represents more opportunity than I even thought I had working with Jason. That was my perspective. You may get a different one if you notice those things. His clients are going to get the different perspective. That was really cool. I caught that. I knew you're up to something visual.
So looking at, again, what's the intention behind everything? So in my space, if I may grab this for a moment, here's the posture that my client is in that chair over here. And when we're in the conversation before the process officially begins, notice the air quotations for the recording, as I comment on the visuals, we're here in this dialogue having this conversation. And it's where I have a formal shift as to the hypnosis is about to begin. We know the entire experience is hypnosis, yet I'm facilitating a scene change. That all of a sudden, here's the moment things are going to be different, which in my case, I have fluorescent lights above. They have the cloud diffusers, so they don't feel like you're under fluorescent lights. So there's a moment where there's a lighting change where I stand up and my line is just standard to go. Great, let's turn off these big lights. They get old after a while. And I'll swing over here and sit closer to you. And suddenly the tone of the room completely changes. This is the benefit, to really rewind some of the lineage, of what you could really credit to a Dave Ellman style of delivery, which is that the modern hypnotist can begin conversational. And by beginning conversational, now I have the opportunity to bring up that energy and bring up that excitement and really get you into that empowered state of mind. And then from there, I can begin to slow it down and become a little bit more specific with my tone, a little bit more pointed with my words and my intention of what I'm saying. There's a scene in the theater career where this actor begins the scene and the script said angrily. So he comes out in the scene, I am so pissed off about this, and he's very angry. And he turns the page, and you see him suddenly burst out in laughter, because the script now says in the stage directions, even angrier than before. And he goes, oh, I did too much. Let me rewind back and do that again.
Moderately irritated.
Yeah, so having to find that range. What's the scale of that emotion? Because now it's calling for him to go even angrier, and he completely blew it on the first time. So recognizing that because I moved from here to there, there's a theatrical shift. There's a lighting change that occurs. It's where whether you make use of music or not, the benefit of it at times, if you are even having it playing, don't have it play the entire time they're in the space. I've seen some people who do that. Again, think of it as a theatrical effect. Now here comes this thing, and this is what occurs. Even better, in my opinion, have that music, if you're going to use it, at such a low volume that part of the mind is wondering, am I really hearing that or am I imagining that? To go for a little bit of a magical effect there, as opposed to, man, that's Zamfir, Lord of the Pan Flute. So having that moment of very specific references just for you and me, apparently. So having that moment where there's a shift, the same way that, again, our tonality, which just is a soft plug, it's a free workshop this year. I'm doing a 2-hour tomorrow on organic hypnotic phenomenon. And it's going to be a whole master class of hypnotic tonality. It's at 12 noon. And the place where you can build up an expectation. But again, think of that reference I made of the movie where suddenly the scene goes completely silent. Where a lot of classic stage hypnotists, the energy of the process is all, and now you're going to be up and you're going to be dancing, and here's what's going to happen now, and now you're a platypus, and now you're going to be doing this, and now you're going to be doing that, and it's all the same tone. As opposed to you've done the big dancing routine and suddenly, well, here's something very interesting. In a moment, these people are to discover, when their eyes open, everything about me completely disappears. My clothing, my skin, my microphone, everything just vanishes. And I've completely changed the tone. You go to a concert, not every song is the same rhythm. Not every moment, not every scene of a movie. In fact, watch the camera on the screen and the way that they change the view of something. So I can be in a moment, if I'm going for a moment of hypnotic phenomenon, to not necessarily be in that old school mindset of, I am the almighty hypnotist who commands thine arm not to bend. Instead, to have that moment of noticing now the longer you hold that arm outwards, it gets even stronger. Try to bend now. Let me rewind that. As you hold that arm outwards, feel that hand squeezing down, feel that energy moving up throughout that arm as it gets stronger and stronger, because now, notice, the more you try to bend that thing, it just gets even stronger. Try now. It gets even stronger. Really, check that out. It gets even stronger. Here's the part you might be talking about later. Open your eyes, because as you look at that arm, it gets even stronger. Kind of weird, right? Yeah, try it out. What does that feel like? And actually have that moment where I'm shifting that perspective of, I was the director of the movie in the first chunk of that, but then suddenly the tone completely drops out from under it, and now I'm the guy sitting in the movie theater seat next to you, watching this really cool thing happen, which breaks away the old expectation of some people don't use conviction moments because they go, oh, that's a stage hypnosis thing. But to find, again, what's the metaphor that can come out of that phenomenon? The way that Book of Mormon, great example, because, which as a side note, the Mormon community apparently loves that because they did their research so well that they're going, oh, that's an inside joke that only we get. I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. We went to go see the movie, the amazing thing of animated movies with incredible social commentary. Thank you. To go see, what was it, Zootopia. It's like, wow, okay, this is really about the government and the police force trying to criminalize and blame minority populations for things that are not their fault. Holy blank, they went there. The movie Smallfoot, which is about the Yetis and the Bigfoots discovering regular people. They're like, oh my God, this is somewhere, we're walking out of that movie and I'm looking at my wife and going, was that politics or was that religion? She goes, I don't know, that was amazing. And I bring this up because here's your client and their story is, I'm here to quit smoking. What's underneath that? What's the tone that's really underneath that? And where we can use that as the leverage point, as the emotional leverage, that this is not about stopping smoking. This is about you becoming that better father. This is about you using every bit of your strength that's there. It's about using whatever part of that story. You know, the way that in so many different TV shows nowadays, here's where they bring in the guest director. Yet still, the guest director comes in. I think there was an episode of Breaking Bad that was directed by Quentin Tarantino, which he still had to be true to the characters. Yet he brought some of his style into that episode. I may be mixing up shows. I think it was Walking Dead, either way. But here's this moment where you have to keep the integrity of the character. So again, through this conversation, looking at what's the subtext of who this person is, what can we leverage of that? So looking at the entire phenomenon of not just this moment, but what is that little thing inside of them that we can draw out and use that as a strength as part of the process. To
continue with the correlations here, set changes. In theater, they change sets all the time. One of the best theatrical productions I saw was Phantom of the Opera, where the set design was absolutely amazing. Some engineer went wild on that. And the set changed at the same time that there was a musical break. And the musical break, the crescendo allowed the set to change. Everything was so intentional, and they were dramatically going from one scene to another scene. And I've seen productions where they do that. They go from one scene to another scene, but it's not so subtle. It's very dramatic. I used to, when seeing clients in my office, I'd say, okay, I'm going to start some relaxing music for you that's going to help your brainwaves to slow down and yada, yada, yada. And I would tell them that's what's going to happen. Now, I switch that. Now I just gradually bring up the volume of the music. It's at 0, and it gradually comes up. So they ease into it. I used to do that. I did that for years in my stage show. I wouldn't just, tell them that this was going to happen. I would tell them a few minutes before that I'm going to play some music, but I wouldn't tell them when I was going to start it. So all of a sudden it would just gradually fade in. So the transitions were so smooth, they don't even know the set is changing. In my office, when you walked into my office, my physical office, there were 3 pictures on the wall. Into accessories, they saw those motivational pictures. And the headlines were, when you walked in my office, you saw this wall first, then you saw this wall where the chair was, the hypnosis chair. And then when you were sitting in the chair, you would see this wall. And the pictures were, the headlines were, challenges, opportunity, vision. Nobody ever noticed it, or did they? When you walk in with a challenge. That's why you came to see me. When you go towards the chair, you walk towards opportunity. When you sit in the chair, you have the vision to overcome. And if the opportunity did present itself, I would explain that to clients. And they would always go, yeah, I thought there was kind of something funny about that. Wow, thanks for connecting those dots. Sometimes you don't have to connect the dots, they connect them for you. Set changes, transitions. How do you transition from your welcome to your pre-talk, to your explanation of hypnosis, to your, from your client forms they have to fill out, to getting to the next thing? How do you transition? How do you set change? So some things to consider. One of the best magic shows you'll ever see, there are 2 actually, Redneck Comedy Magic show, which is totally wrong on a lot of levels too, but really funny. Funny show you'll ever see in Las Vegas. The other one, the best show you'll ever see is David Copperfield, because he actually is a magician playing the role of a hypnotist. Not really, but he gets in your head. He is so profound. I've seen people in his show cry. It's not why I came here. I went to get fooled, and by now I'm crying because the story is so beautiful. And you know what? He inspires emotion. That's what we do, huh? So he's kind of a magician playing the role of a hypnotist. And it starts before the show starts. He does a trick where it's a production. He has a box that's hanging on the front of the stage right there in the top of the proscenium there, and eventually he's going to get to that, and that prediction is going to be, things that come up within the audience. But before the show starts, the lighting is so subtle. The lighting in the house is full, where the audience is, it's full lighting so people don't trip and fall where they're getting to their seats. But then all of a sudden from the back of the theater, all the way from the back of the theater, these 2 guys come in coveralls that say crew on the back, so there's no mistake who they are. And they have this cart, just like that, and there's a box. And as they're walking down the center aisle, the lighting, there's a spotlight on them. Well, if the light's already at full, that's at full, well, it's just full plus 10%. Just highlights it, just enough to where you can't see the circle of the spotlight follow them, but it seems a little brighter right there. And they don't say anything, but they'll stop halfway down the aisle. It's a long, big theater, deep theater. They'll walk halfway down the aisle, and they stop, and then they start having a conversation. And they're not really saying anything, but people go, what are you doing? And you elbow your husband or wife. What are these guys doing? What are they doing? Seems a little late to be doing stuff here. The show's going to start in a few minutes. And this is 10, 15 minutes before the show starts. And all of a sudden they get to the front of the stage, and I'll face the appropriate way. They get to the front of the stage, and they need to hang the box right there. Well, and so what do? They need a cable to come down to hang the box on. Thank you. And so they look all the way up at the light booth, who is not the guy that controls that cable, by the way. That's back there in the fly rail, it's called, the fly space. So it comes down from back there. There's a rope and a pulley, and it comes down. But they look all the way back up there because they want your attention. They want you to notice without them going, hey, everybody pay attention. We're going to put this box up here that we're going to use later in the show. But we don't want to really say it that way, though. Just kind of look up here. So they look up there, and they go, bring the box down, okay? And now everybody's going, what that box is. Now they've got everybody's attention. And most people show up 10 minutes before the show starts. So now they've got you. They've got you where they want you. They're creating that expectation. Then the box comes down, and they simply then just go away. Now, if they would have, I know theater, but what would be a more effective way to do that? Come from backstage, hang the thing down, right? But they want to set that stage. They want the transition. They want you to look back. They want you to know that you've experienced hypnotic phenomenon before you've experienced it. They want you to look back at the end of the show, or towards the end of the show, when he does the trick with the box, and the box gets lowered down, and opens it up, and it's exactly what was predicted, predicted what was going to be said in the audience. They want you to go back and retrace those steps and go, and do what exactly happened. Holy smokes, that was up there before we even started. But people don't always analyze that way. They just accept it now to be a truism. That's what we do in hypnosis too, right? We want people to accept what we create for them in expectation as a truism, as a reality, as a new belief system, correct? Well, we're a smoker, now you are a non-smoker.
So consider the idea of starting with the end in mind. And again, what are those elements I can add into my process, which may not necessarily be, oh, I can do a 6-step reframe now. Oh, I can use this technique. It's where there's a phrase I've been workshopping in my mind, and I still don't like it, but I'm using it nowadays, which is that going placebo on techniques that actually work. Wait a minute. Taking something that we know is effective. The strategies that we're taught as hypnotists, these are things that are often modeled from other modalities of work. These are often things that we as the practitioner figure out, workshop for ourselves, and then go, hey, this is working, let me share this with my community. But to look at not just the technique, but as well as the technique, what is it I can do around the process that really sets up that technique to become even more effective, to supercharge it, as it were. So the client comes into my space, and here's this desk off to the side with a glass jar that's filled to the brim with crushed up packs of cigarettes, and it's overflowing, and there's just a big pile of stuff all around it. As printing in Arlington Magazine this week is a full-page feature on me crumpling up cigarettes and throwing them into a trash can. And this is the first thing I'm about to do with this, is get it printed a little bit bigger, frame it right in the office, so the moment you walk in, that's the thing you see right away. I'll call it out. I was here last year at this event. I got the award of 2017 Hypnotist of the Year from this conference. And that is right there on the wall the moment you walk in the door. So recognize that you're building an environment. You're building a scene, the same way as here's these guys wheeling down this box, and without saying it, it's to go, hey, this is important. Instead, using the environment to create that. My idea of the stop smoking person is that as soon as they walk in, I want them just knowing, yeah, this is the place where this happens. How do I inoculate the word if? How do I just completely eradicate the word if of the process? And using this with all other parts of what you do. So we learn through stories. So it's where I'm going to playfully find the way to bring in client success stories, which often you're in the work enough, people have these interesting experiences where they get the change, and it's this metaphorical way to run a process before you run the process. To give a very indirect suggestion in an extremely direct way. Now, just so you know, I use this phrase of, the amazing thing about working with a fear is that the measure of success is that something didn't happen. It's kind of interesting, right? The measure of success is that you go through something and it's a complete non-issue. Some people would expect, choir of angels and booming music. No, the measure of success is just that something didn't happen. So here's my guy who called me up from his convention he was concerned about. He had a concern with small spaces. And he calls up, and he goes, I don't know if it worked, Jason. What do you mean? He goes, well, I was in the elevator and I was bored. That's how the rest of us feel in elevators. Congratulations, you've got this. And true story, Keith Livingston has a similar story, and then it happened to me, and it's my story now too. So this happened with a client, and I'll bring this into the conversation with the client. And what's happening now? They're accepting the suggestion that that's a possible outcome of what's about to happen. And also at the same time, they're running that filter through to go, yeah, I like that. I'm going to do that too. So rather than just the directed thing, what's the layer of what we do? So this place of, for some reason, whenever I talk about theatrical effects, I always go to a Willie Nelson concert. Willie Nelson was on stage, and here's The big rowdy song, definitely classic country music style. Then all of a sudden, he's regressing the entire audience back to children because he does Rainbow Connection from the Muppet movie and half the audience is crying. And the immediate shift out of that song was beautiful because the next song he did was To All the Girls I Loved Before, which originally was a duet with him and Julio Iglesias, and instead he does both parts. And it's a frickin' comedy routine. And that shift, that from the touching moment, this is the childlike wonder that I brought out in the entire audience, immediately everybody's laughing. So to look at again, there's an amazing comedy special, I forget the name of it, the one that Patton Oswalt just recently did, where it's him telling the very touching story of his wife suddenly, without any warning, passed away. And the structure of how the audience knowing going into this routine, he was going to get there eventually. He was going to eventually hit that story. And I forget the exact bit before, but it's just the most ridiculous, silliest thing you could possibly do to have that drop down. There's an amazing special on Netflix, Neil Brennan, 3 microphones, or just 3 mics. And the premise of it is there's 3 microphones that are set up. This one's classic long-form stand-up comedy. This one over here is one-liners. This one is deeply personal stories. And the theatrical element of it is you get to this place where you're listening to this incredible story of the challenges he had with his father. And even before he goes over here, there's this sense of relief that, oh, he's going over to the funny microphone again. But then he's opening up a loop. And as he's back over here, you're so satisfied that he finalizes the story and tells you the incredible ending of how things smoothed out. So look at the places of your process. How can I set something up? How can I fix it a little bit later? How can I invoke that texture in such a way that really builds, let's call it, a memorable experience? You're going to be talking about Book of Mormon for quite some time. Here's the experience of, I'm going into, it's Saturday next weekend, and the out-of-town Broadway tryout for the Beetlejuice musical is in DC. And here I am going in with the entire expectation of the movie, knowing that they've definitely changed some things to update it for 2018, and they can't just deliver the movie exactly as is. They've got to find that moment to expand what was a 90-minute movie into a 2.5-hour musical. So what's the expectation coming in? How do we bend it? How do we morph it? And how do we really create that environment for change? So start to think about your process, not just the individual strategies, but what's the entire thematic score of what you're building and how do we put that into use?
And in honor of you for attending this, we're going to sweeten the pot a little bit more because tonight in the karaoke, Jason and I will be singing To All the Girls I've Loved Before. He doesn't know that yet.
I call Willie.
I was going to call Julio. I mean,
there you go.